Royal Military College parliamentary debate. Thank you all for being here today for what will surely be a high-spirited and interesting debate. I now like to introduce Colonel Ryan, head of the Department of Law, who we are very fortunate to have as our sponsor department. Colonel Ryan.
Thank you so much. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. General Clark, General Mrs. Clark, General Mrs. Tremblay. Bienvenue, welcome. I took a little French. This gentleman be here because he's going to not claim the head of the Department of Foreign Languages. Indeed, and I would like to start off by saying, le stylo est sur la table. And mention that our event today is a sort of intellectual fisticuffs. So if you have not seen it, hold on to your seats. This is hockey, but all verbal. It's amazing speed, accuracy, humor, and of course style is going to be taking place here today. And for us, it's an awesome and outstanding opportunity to see actual people who could be parliamentarians engage in parliamentary debate. And we don't call it congressional debate because we would be filibustering. It would only be one person who would speak the whole entire time. Yes, sir. And I should start out, by the way, in addition to welcoming all of our distinguished guests today, by starting up by saying our chief judge is the Dean of Engineering of the Royal Military College, Dr. Bates. Former judge advocate. Actually, he is a judge advocate. I'm a former judge advocate. I'm a professor at USMA. But Colonel Toole has also been an actual judge and has presided over many very hard-fought and bitter trials. But nothing like what he's going to do today. But still, Colonel Toole is a graduate of Penn State, the Pennsylvania State University, undergraduate, and went to Western New England Law. And so we're very honored to have him with us as well. He's also our senior academy professor. So we're just trying to throw out some of our qualifications to even attempt to be up to your level, Chief Judge. And in fact, Chief Judge Bates has for us selected the topic, which just minutes ago our two teams were given. And if you don't mind, sir, Your Honor, if you could please announce the topic.
Okay. Be it resolved that the main battle tank is obsolete. So I was looking for something that had a bit of a military flair, a technical flair, something that I'm interested in, that was short because I was told last night that they didn't like these long, rambling resolutions. So after some discussion with colleagues.
Yes, sir. I recommended last year's resolution. I suppose that people still have hurt feelings about that. It was too long. I'm just kidding. That was perfect. And are there any tankers or potential tankers in the room? Yes. Can someone get tissues for those in case they become overcome with emotion during this? But at any rate, what we will do then is we will take our seats here, and we're going to, how many minutes do they have approximately, our timekeeper?
Ma'am, they have approximately 3 minutes left.
Approximately 3 minutes left. So we will take our seats and we will imagine what they're going to say when they come out. But in the meantime, I would like to yield the floor to our cadet, firstie in charge, or actually one of the firsties in charge of the team, and to talk to us a little bit about the team and also our debaters today. So, Your Honor, if you could join us here on the high bench.
Thank you.
Phelan, I yield the floor to you. Phelan 1 is from San Francisco, California, which is a bastion of armor.
So before we start, allow me to introduce our warriors of rhetorical strife today. So on the West Point side, we will have Cadet Nathan Mayo. Nathan Mayo is an economics major from Onseeda, Alabama. He's a fourth-year member of the parliamentary debate team and is currently serving as a cadet in charge. He's also serving as the assistant cadet in charge of the chapel choir and also as a company executive officer. He has branch armor and plans on serving with the 2nd Stryker Cavalry Regiment in Germany. In his spare time, he enjoys following current events, traveling, and spent one of his semesters abroad at Morocco. Our second USMA member is Ken Vogt. Ken Vogt is a systems engineering major from Iona, Michigan. He's a second-year member of the parliamentary debate team and is currently the team treasurer. He's also an honor representative for the class of 2015. He intends to branch to the Corps of Engineers and would like to do humanitarian work. In his spare time, he enjoys reading, weightlifting, running, mountain biking, and classic movies. From the Royal Military College side, we have Matt Clancy. Matt Clancy is a civil engineer and hails from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. He's a second year at RMC and in his first year with the debate team, currently serving as Vice President External. He's also involved with the rowing and curling teams. Cadet Clancy previously served 3 years as a combat engineer non-commissioned member in the reserves and is now trained to be a construction engineering officer. In his free time, he enjoys being on the water, sailing, or out in nature off-roading. The second RMC member is Nicholas Huckster. Nicholas Huckster is majoring in history and minoring in French from Toronto, Ontario. He's a second-year member of the RMC debate team and its current club president. As well, he serves as a second-year class senior for the class of 2015. His trade is infantry officer and plans on specializing in becoming a paratrooper, joining either the Royal 22nd Regiment or the Royal Canadian Regiment. He plays jazz piano and is currently learning how to sail. So, how does this style of debate work? There are two sides. The government, who speaks first, and the opposition, who will do their best to deny victory to the government. Then the government will come up to shore up their case once again, after which the opposition will be back to try to tear their case down. Side government will bring forth the topic, as well as the terms of the debate. They will come up here and convince you why their idea or plan is of consequential importance to the status quo, and improvement on the status quo, while the opposition has to show you that no good can come of the government's plan, or that the cost outweighs the potential benefits. In actual parliament, debaters may interrupt and ask questions or points of information during another debater's speech. Do not be alarmed, this is perfectly normal. After each debater has a chance to speak, the opposition and government will have one last speaking opportunity to rebut the opposing side, as well as reaffirm the merits of their case. To that end, the parliamentary debate is about how well each side presents their case, while facts play an important and pivotal role in normal discourse. It is far more important that debaters develop their points logically and that their opponents respond to the facts in question. Without further ado, I'd like to present our debaters today.
Thank you, Phelan. Phelan will be our timekeeper also for this round. We should note that all speeches will be allowed a 30-second grace period overtime before the judging panel, led by our Chief Judge, Dr. Bates, will pound down the speaker, not literally, but figuratively. It is generally appropriate, in fact, for the audience to also pound desks in approval of a speaker's point, and in lieu of desks, clapping is also appropriate.
I now call this House to order and call upon the Honorable Prime Minister to deliver the first constructive speech of the round, not to exceed 7 minutes. First speaker, Officer Cadet Nicholas Huckster.
Here.
Where's the timekeeper? Over here.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable judge, patient timekeeper, my most esteemed opponents, I stand before you today in very hallowed halls, the halls of West Point, to debate a very odd resolution. Be it resolved that the main battle tank is obsolete. I would like to first start out by defining the resolution, then I will get into my arguments, and then I will close. But what I would first like to do, before any of that, is to give you a little exposition. Because, ladies and gentlemen, today is a momentous day. Today is one of the first days of 2013, the first day that we can make a decision to change the way that we look at warfare. For 60-some-odd years, we've been living in a Cold War mentality where the other side was primarily based around tanks, and then we had to counter. Although, at the end of the day, if everyone really, truly thought about it, the Cold War would have ended in nuclear weapons. So tanks were really anachronistic even then. But what I'm saying today, what we are saying, the honorable government, is this, that main battle tanks are obsolete. And so I'd first like to start out by defining that resolution, and that is this. The main battle tank will be defined as a tracked and not wheeled vehicle that is designed to use against other tanks. And that is a certain weight class, but it is irrelevant for this debate. As well, obsolete we will term as no longer useful. Something that is obsolete is something that we no longer use because it is no longer effective. And that is what it is for the main battle tank. So, the arguments for our case are this. We have three main arguments. The first argument is the cost of armor and its role today. The second argument will be air superiority. And the third argument will will be covered by my second speaker, Officer Cadet Clancy, and it will be the role of armor today and proportional force. And he will clarify some points that I've already said. So I'd like to first start out by saying the cost of armor and its use today, and its role primarily. There are two main costs when we look at defense spending. There is the primary monetary cost, but the one that is far more important, and the one that is in this room right now, and the majority of us are, and that's the human cost. We must look at this and say, are we risking the lives of our soldiers unnecessarily based on a dogma and a doctrine that we've developed over decades and thought that we were right simply because our military members said that it was okay? From time to time, military members make mistakes. I can agree with you on that one. From time to time, we can take things too far. There's a statue of a man down there named MacArthur. He wanted to nuke North Korea, and the president said no. So I say the politicians have to have their say one day in the context of defense. And that is what we are doing right now. We want to save soldiers' lives, and we want to save money. And to do that, we are saying that the main battle tank is obsolete, and there must be a reanalogy of what we use the main battle tank for. And I say, and I propose, is that the main battle tank is no longer useful. Primarily, one, because of the role of combat today. What wars have we been fighting? I don't know about you, but the enemies in Afghanistan haven't really had their own main battle tanks. We haven't been fighting battles in the steeps of Afghanistan. There hasn't been, no thank you, there hasn't been any battles on the plains of Afghanistan. What we are looking for is an enemy that is primarily infantry-based, that does not have the capability to compete with us in the main battle tank context. What we are looking for is an enemy that is agile, that is intelligent, but is most of all asymmetrically disqualified to fight a war with us. We have the advantage. And a main battle tank, while advantageous, doesn't really help with an enemy that can run away. A main battle tank doesn't get up to a mountain. An infantryman does. No thank you. What we are looking for right now is we are looking for a new way to fight war. So I say that we have an obsolete way of doing this. And as I said before, this is no longer the Cold War. There's no longer nukes pointed at each other in the context of one day that button will be pushed, we'll go to DEFCON 1, and there'll be no more cities, there'll be no more people, there'll be no more world. Instead, what we have is we have a delicate world balance between different powers of different countries. And we are looking at the main battle tank as being anachronistic. There was two schools of thought, ladies and gentlemen, that became anachronistic, that even today we find ridiculous. The school of thought of cavalry in the First World War, and the school of thought of battleships in the Second. In the First World War, do you not realize that machine guns could cut down an entire regiment of cavalry in one fell swoop? And we got rid of that very quickly. But that was only because of war. We need to be prepared for that before that happens. We do not need to lose a regiment of cavalry. We do not need to lose a brigade of armored vehicles before. We don't need to lose the lives of our men and women in arms simply because we are too dogmatically approached this idea. And now I'd like to talk about air superiority. Ladies and gentlemen, I am an infantryman. And what I believe is the great superiority of our ground forces and the idea of infantry first and foremost. But that being said, I am very much intimidated by the machine guns and the missiles and the bombs that they put on the planes and the helicopters that they use on our side. They are the dominant force. We use Predator drones today. That's the Air Force, ladies and gentlemen. We use Predator drones today for attacking enemies that we could not otherwise reach. We do not use tanks to climb up to mountains to fight people like this. A 120mm smoothbore cannon from an Abrams is a lot less accurate than a Predator missile drone. What I'm saying to you, ladies and gentlemen, is we need a scalpel and we're using a hammer. And for God's sakes, we need to look at this right now. If the next combat mission, the next combat we use is one where we use main battle tanks, then I have to say we are going to see the deaths of our people unnecessarily. We need to be the aggressive, the flexible force. My partner will be talking about this more so, but we look at it and we look at the point of air cavalry. When we killed, well, when the Americans killed Osama bin Laden, and thank you for that very much. They did not do it with main battle tanks, ladies and gentlemen. They used it with special forces and 2 stealth helicopters. If that's not the Air Force and the Army working together constructively, then I don't know what is. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a case before you, and that is this. The main battle tank is obsolete. You understand that, I understand that, we all understand that. An RPG-7 can take in a main battle tank. How much does an RPG-7 cost, ladies and gentlemen? Maybe less than $1,000. How much is the main battle tank? Upward of $5 million, maybe 10 with the advanced computers, the ammunition, and the logistical requirements that we need. I'm a very passionate person, ladies and gentlemen. But from time to time, I realize that there's certain things that we have to adapt to. There is dogma, and then there's the right course of action. I'd like to give you a quote, actually, by William Gladstone. He was a British Prime Minister. Men are apt to mistake the strength of their feeling for the strength of their argument. The armor school of today, ladies and gentlemen, is antiquated, and that's what they're doing. And Gladstone did not just stop right there. He said, "The hated mind resents the chill touch and relentless scrutiny of logic." Ladies and gentlemen, my touch is extremely cold. It is frigid, the logic that I have, and I'm providing to you that right now. All I want is your support in this resolution, not just for me, not just for the main battle tanks, but for the cost to this country and for the cost of the people in the armed forces. If we don't change our doctrine today, we will have dead cavalry regiments and we'll have sunk battleships. I don't need another Pearl Harbor to know that this doctrine is wrong. So let me just summarize what I've said so far. What I've said is this. The cost of armor today and this rule today is obsolescent. We are not using it as we properly should, and a main battle tank is no longer needed in the role that's used right now. And instead, air superiority, and that was my second point, is quite superior, as we all know. An Apache helicopter can take out not just one brigade of tanks, but a whole column of them. So what we have to look at is we have to look at what's effective and what's right. And ladies and gentlemen, a main battle tank is no longer effective. And we are most certainly right. Thank you very much.
We thank the Prime Minister for his eloquent and frigid remarks, and now call upon the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Nathan Mayo, to deliver the second constructive speech of the round, not to exceed 8 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, I am very privileged once again to be here for the 3rd time that I have debated the Royal Military College of Canada. It's certainly a blast every time. And this resolution is particularly entertaining to me because I just chose my branch. And my branch is armor. That said, ladies and gentlemen, here's how I'm going to break this round down. Let's talk about the resolution real quick. So, be it resolved that the main battle tank is obsolete. We're fine with her definitions in general. We point out that obsolete is something that has a much greater cost than a benefit. But let's think about it this way. If perhaps I was doing some work around my house, which I don't have, but maybe I'll have one when I go away. So, I'm working on my car, right? And I have a toolbox, and I pull out my pliers, and I pull out the wrenches, and I fix this up in my car, and I put them away, and I go, wait a second. You know, I didn't use my hammer. I better throw that thing out. I'm not going to need that, because I didn't just use it right now. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not the right way to approach a strategic defense. Let me break this down for you in 3 different levels. The 3 points I'm going to bring out on the opposition side of the house before we start addressing their points are the strategic level of war. Then we'll get down to operational maneuver within campaigns, and then tactical. What happens when the guns are firing? So the first point I have for you on the strategic level is that tanks offer a credible deterrent. We have a lot of big things in big militaries with which we intend to project power. For example, the aircraft carrier. Now certainly the aircraft carrier can do a lot, but it also has limits. There are limits to how far those birds can fly away from that carrier. It has constraints, but it projects power. In the same way, bringing tanks into a main invasion projects a lot of power. It has perhaps even a deterrent effect to see an infantry, to see a military that has these powerful machines. Now, that's just the deterrent part of it, but what about the credibility? So let's look at the economics of this on a strategic level. On a strategic level, you have to understand there's a difference between unit cost and marginal cost. So the unit cost to buy a tank is pretty expensive, so it's many millions of dollars, like $20, $30 million. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But the tanks are expensive. However, the marginal cost to fire one shell is relatively low, relative to, say, a laser-guided missile. Because we've got this operational mindset in the United States that we're going to have $1 million Patriot missiles to shoot down $20 million planes. That's cool. What if your enemy is throwing $50,000 drones at you, and you're still shooting $1 million Patriot missiles at them? That's problematic. That's why we keep multiple tools in our toolbox, so we can deal with multiple kinds of threats. Because at the end of the day, we need the credible deterrent of a weapon system that we can bring to bear in combat and keep it firing. Unlike laser-guided missiles, which in a large-scale conventional attack against a conventional force, those other conflicts, the other projects I might need to work on with my toolbox, we need some other tools that we can actually afford to maintain. Which brings me to my second point. On the operational level, tanks bring a lot of mobility into combat. So, sure, we fight counterinsurgencies, but a lot of times before we ever get around to fighting said counterinsurgency, we have to knock out conventional forces. And how do we do that? With massive firepower, with combined arms. And we want those combined arms to move very quickly. In the first 10 days in Iraq, in the initial invasions, we cleared out 300 miles in some areas with very fast-moving units.
On that point.
And I'll take you in just a moment. But with those fast-moving units, we were able to effectively get the firepower to where we needed it much faster, which allowed us to complete our mission in a less costly manner. But you disagree?
Was one of the limiting factors in how far you could advance in Iraq right off the get-go not the logistics that were required to support your main battle tanks?
Absolutely. There are all kinds of constraints and limitations. Right? So when we look at aircraft carriers, don't you have constraints on them? Can we only get those planes so far? Conventional bombers, we can only get them so far. There are all kinds of constraints. My goodness, we have to bring gas for Humvees. Why do we bother bringing those things into battle? Gas is expensive. Ladies and gentlemen, just because something is associated with constraints and it has costs, doesn't mean it is not also associated with benefits, which is why we submit that that massive, fast-moving firepower is very useful. Leading me to my third point. On the tactical level, the third point we're going to bring up is that it's the most reliable firepower you can have in certain combat settings. So whether it's conventional or whether it's an insurgency that has conventional hubs with the insurgents attack, you want firepower on hand. So I don't want to have to call an airplane and say, hey, what, you're watching television? I mean, I know you're the Air Force. No, come on. I need some backup here, guys. We're under attack. No, I want something that can sit on my fob. And a lot of times, I don't have room for a runway on top of my fob. I don't have room for that. So what I do, I might have room for a tank. Tanks can move around quickly. I can keep that maneuverability. And if I decide we need to go follow the enemy, we need to bring the fight to them, I can bring tanks to them a lot faster than I can bring artillery. That's why you need that powerful weaponry on the battlefield. That incredible suppression of the enemy is what allows us to project power as a nation state. So going into their points, they had two primary points. The first point is that there's a human cost of war, we don't want to do things the wrong way, and certain things are anachronistic. Just because certain things are anachronistic, which I will concur. Yes, the cavalry we have now is armored. But just because certain things are anachronistic doesn't make it follow that tanks are anachronistic. Excuse my Latin, it's a non sequitur. It doesn't follow. Just because I prove that some things are bad doesn't mean that main battle tanks are bad. So they really didn't get into that, but they tried on their second point, which I will also address. So they talk about this idea of air superiority. And they say, because we have air assets, we no longer need tanks. Because tanks have constraints, air assets are unconstrained? No. Air assets also have constraints. And one of those constraints, as I point out, is that the air assets aren't right there when you need them when it's a sneak attack and the enemy hits and runs. You obviously oftentimes cannot get your air assets there fast enough. So, and again, they ignore the idea of the marginal cost of those laser-guided missiles as opposed to those tank shells. That's something else they're not taking into consideration. But when they get those $100 million planes or those Apache gunships, did I hear that we've never had an aircraft shot down with a simple Stinger missile? I think, in fact, we have. So aircraft are also vulnerable in the same way that perhaps a main battle tank is vulnerable. But I will tell you what, if I have to be shot at with an RPG-7 and I'm going to pick my vehicle, you know what I'm going to pick? Main battle tank, ladies and gentlemen. Because that's got the best armor on the battlefield. That's what we bring to bear, and you can protect it in a way that you cannot protect traditional artillery. So just because there has some vulnerabilities, and doesn't mean we're not countering those vulnerabilities with better reactive armor, with high-tech systems which engage those RPGs in the air, etc. So as technology improves, things which used to be anachronistic get a lot better. For example, the infantry soldier. In World War I, they might have thought infantry is about to go completely out of date, because whenever you stand up, you get shot down. But as the technologies of war changed, as we evolved the infantry soldier, gave him a different weapon set, gave a different mission task, operated on smaller unit levels, ultimately what we were able to do is adjust the technology so that we have all the tools in our toolbox to accomplish all the strategic objectives that we need to be successful in today's war. So they mentioned the limits of tanks on their own, but my whole point here is that combined arms works collaboratively. It's not, no branch of the military, no matter how much each of us will tell you it is true, can fight war on its own. You have to bring in those heavy artillery assets, you have to bring in the ground troops, you have to bring in the air assets. And to just cut one out of the equation because we're not using it right now, even though we used it several years ago in the initial invasion of Iraq, seems to me to be a highly irrational action. So we have to create a policy, a toolkit, which can accomplish our strategic objectives in a conventional or insurgent war, because we do not always choose our enemies. And that's why we're proud to oppose.
We thank the Leader of the Opposition for his eloquent and incensed remarks, and now call upon the Honorable Member of Government, Mr. Matthew Clancy, to deliver the third constructive speech of the round, not to exceed 8 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, esteemed guests, and fellow debaters. The bill before us today is be it resolved that the main battle tank is now obsolete. What I'd like to do in my speech is first contribute to the points that Mr. Huckster made in the beginning. Then I'd like to deconstruct some of the arguments that side opposition made. And then I would like to follow through with my own constructive arguments to show you why, certainly, the main battle tank is currently obsolete. So to begin, well, let's look at the Leader of the Opposition and what side opposition has presented with us so far. We all found that toolbox argument, the toolbox analogy, very cute, didn't we? It was nice, it was enjoyable. It made sense. However, the flaw with side opposition's toolbox argument is this. If we kept every tool that we ever had, if we maintained every piece of equipment or every option that we ever had as a military as a whole, as a warfighting group, the bottom of our toolbox would be filled with Roman legionnaires, topped up with battleships, and finally there'd be a large number of horse infantry on top, a simple option that isn't available anymore. To continue on, his constructive arguments for that, the first one was that he brought up was that tanks are a deterrent. They scare the enemy. They scare them. They don't want to come up. They don't want to fight a tank. Madam Speaker, we on side government will concede that a M1 Abrams main battle tank rolling up the road at you is scary. That's for certain. But what we would also like to argue is this. 2,000 pounds of laser-guided Liberty coming off of an F-18 that just flew at Mach 2 from a USS Nimitz-class aircraft carrier is far more terrifying. It's the enemy that you can't see but you know is there that is a bigger threat than the one that currently exists, but you would disagree.
Absolutely. So how long is that usual sighting of the Mach 2 plane as opposed to a tank that's, say, sitting on a fob all day?
And that is an excellent argument, and that is the exact point that we on side government are trying to make. The enemy that you see coming up the road, the main battle tank that you see rolling towards you, isn't difficult to get out of the way of. He's coming, you run. Especially in the modern urban combat, in the modern battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, where tank maneuverability is at a minimum. It's far easier to get out of the way of a main battle tank than it is a fighter that's hovering overhead. Or better yet, a Predator drone that can loiter on target for 12 hours. We on side government know that the main battle tank is currently obsolete. And now I'd like to continue into my constructive arguments later on, carry on with some of the points that the honorable opposition have made. So, Mr. Huckster presented to you the arguments of the cost of armor very well, air superiority, and I'm going to continue with the role of armor today and proportional force, which is a huge deal on today's battlefield. So, the role of the tank. Let's look at the role of the tank. Traditionally, tanks have been used for tank-on-tank combat and have proven less effective in other fields. But to really understand the role of the modern tank, we have to understand the role of the modern battlefield. That is of a fluid urban battlefield. A battlefield where we don't have regiments of the enemy in one place at one time, where the enemy is everywhere and anywhere, and there are no clear lines drawn on the map. That's the battlefield that our proud Canadian and American forces members are dealing with in Iraq and Afghanistan. So, in an urban environment, what are some of the limiting factors in an urban environment? Well, we've got houses everywhere. We've got alleys. We've got roads that simply can't accommodate a 60-ton main battle tank. You simply can't put a tank down an alley to chase a group of Taliban fighters. It won't work. And if you do somehow try to squeeze it down that alleyway, you're going to cause a lot of collateral damage, which I'll talk about later in my proportional force argument. So, now we have, what we deal with now is a large, fluid, fast-moving battlefield. And as Mr. Huckster pointed out with the Osama bin Laden argument, what we face now and what we're dealing with now and more often are helicopter-based maneuvers. Fast, go out, strike the enemy, come back to the fob, as side opposition has already stated with the point of their fobs. So, what we on side government understand, and what we're sure that you clearly understand, is that you can't pick up a tank with a helicopter.
even with a Chinook. You can't pick it up, you can't move it. You can't bring it in to fight with the infantry soldier like you can a helicopter, a drone, or a fighter. However, side opposition clearly disagrees.
Yes, but doesn't our current air assault capabilities allow us to give that movement to the battlefield with like the movement of fuel?
I'm not entirely sure I'll understand, but I'll